the Texas Homeless Network. It's across the state and it's in close touch with faith-based communities. To learn more about this important work, stay with us on Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Hello, I'm Richard Thompson of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, welcoming you to this edition of the show. And today we're turning our attention to a unique service, the Texas Homeless Network. In two ways it's distinctive. It's the one group that is reaching out across the state to coordinate efforts with services rendered to the homeless. It's also one that is linking itself to faith-based communities. Even though it's a recipient of public funding, it's also making that vital connection to where so many of these services are rendered among persons of faith. To learn more about this, we are privileged to have with us Kathy Reed, who is the director, the executive director of the Texas Homeless Network. Kathy, welcome.
Thanks.
And I think that the first thing that comes to mind is just for people who are interested, of course, in how services can be rendered to those who are without shelter. You don't render direct services, but what kind of help do you afford?
We get a lot of phone calls at our 1-800 number from people who think sometimes that we do direct services, because if you look in the phone book under homelessness, you're going to find our phone number. And we don't do direct services. We work with service providers here in Austin, but across the state.
Give me an example of a service provider.
Well, anyone who does any kind of soup kitchen, any shelter program.
Here in Austin.
Here in Austin, we work with Youth Options, with Caritas, with Salvation Army, Foundation for the Homeless. Most of the service providers, we work very closely with the Austin Coalition for the Homeless, and so that gives us contacts with almost every agency in the city that works with homeless people.
Okay, now you're based in Austin, capital city. You've got your headquarters here like so many other such statewide groups do. But elsewhere, across the state, how many service providers do you reach?
Well, that number probably varies from week to week, month to month, as different organizations form themselves. Our mailing list is over 2,000. And that would be 2,000 agencies or individuals that are working somehow or connected with homeless service providing. And so that's quite a number of people across the state that really are interested in the issues around homelessness.
Yeah, Dallas, Fort Worth.
Amarillo to the Valley, El Paso to Port Arthur, just across the state in places that you wouldn't even imagine perhaps that there are homeless people. In the 1990 census in Victoria, they said they only had 7 homeless people.
Okay, as far as they could count.
I guess that's as many as they could count. But they have a coalition of service providers in Victoria, and they have huge number of children in their programs and shelters and all kinds of activities going on in Victoria.
For those 7 people.
Well, for a lot more than 7 people, but I guess only those 7 official people.
Yeah. Well, do you have any statistics on how many homeless there are in Texas?
Well, it's really hard to know because the last census was not done well in counting homeless people. And it's, difficult, I should say, too. It's very difficult to count homeless people so that we have some ideas. One of the problems with identifying how many homeless people there are is a lot of people sort of live under that misconception that a homeless person is perhaps the guy you see on the street corner with the sign.
Right.
And those people are the real visible homeless. But they're really, it's almost like a tip of the iceberg. One of the national organizations, Homeless for the Homeless out of Washington, D.C., says that the average age of a homeless person in the United States is age 9.
Oh, my word.
Now, you don't see kids, on the street corner with signs. They're not visible like that. But there are a huge number of families that people don't realize are homeless. They're living out of cars or living in parks that are going from one shelter to another or living with family members for a short period of time just to make do.
You know, you brought a couple of pictures. I just want to put these up on the screen for a moment. Here's a child sleeping outside. Um, and then there's another one, I think, of what you see, or what you hear about at least, in terms of people sleeping in vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
This is in a car. And when you see the faces of children connected to that, as you say, there's a poignancy to that. And how vulnerable, I mean, the most vulnerable. Well, you don't know, you didn't give me a number because you don't know the numbers.
No.
Can you have any idea, though, whether the numbers are increasing or decreasing or about the same?
Boy, it's hard to know. I think that they are increasing from what I hear. There are more families that are in a lot of ways needy, although on the other hand, the economy is improving.
Well, I was going to say.
And so here in Austin in particular, I would imagine that there are fewer numbers just because if you're able to work right now in Austin, you can probably find a job. I mean, there are a lot more employment opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, people are homeless for a lot of different reasons.
Okay.
And those reasons vary. You have families that are what I would sort of say down on their luck. I met a family in San Antonio where the dad was a construction worker. They had a number of children, and he broke his leg. And after their family savings ran out, they lost their rental apartment and had no place to go. And because they were able to go into a shelter for a few months, as soon as his leg healed, he was able to go right back to work because he's perfectly able to work if his health is good. And as soon as he was employed, they had money and, you know, with some assistance from a faith-based organization, they were back in an apartment and they're doing fine.
Okay, well, let's make that connection out to those organizations that have their roots in congregations or faith-related efforts.
Yeah, there's a huge number of homeless services that are provided by faith-based organizations. I mean, one that immediately comes to mind is the Salvation Army.
Sure.
And in almost every community in Texas, there's a Salvation Army trying to do something to assist people who are homeless. Austin's typical. We have Caritas, we have Foundation for the Homeless, we have a large number of agencies that work with churches and through churches.
But now you receive public funding. The Texas Department of Mental Health
We get
and
our money
Retardation.
from Texas MHMR, Mental Health, Mental Retardation, and also from Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs.
All right.
And our contract does not, well, it even has a little paragraph in there that, you know, we're not doing religious work. You know, we work with service providers, but what happens in reality is a large percentage of the service providers in Texas are faith-based organizations, rescue missions, soup kitchens, shelters that are all of these organizations sponsored by churches or by ecumenical groups. And we work with organizations regardless of whether they're secular or faith-based.
Yeah.
And so that's how we come into contact daily with faith-based communities.
Okay, so you don't provide them money.
No, actually, we don't provide money. We provide information, referrals, resources, technical assistance, a variety of different things. People contact us by email, by our website. They phone us on our 1-800 number. They write us, ask us for information. We do a newsletter every other month that provides information on model programs, ways for they can improve their programming, funding opportunities, ways to.
You can point them to.
We
funds.
point them in the right direction,
Right.
and we do that for any organization that calls and wants some kind of assistance from us. We do a conference yearly. We're the only statewide homeless conference. And we do workshops on how to write grants, as well as how to provide specific kinds of services. And so those, the people who come to our conference quite often come from faith-based communities.
Now, you were telling me before the show that there's a conference coming up this fall that's involving the state legislators.
Well, what we do with our conference is, for a long time, I think the conference was in Austin. Before I came to the Texas Homeless Network, it was quite often in Austin. And a few years back, a decision was made on the board that we need to really, if we're going to be a statewide agency, we need to really cross the state. And so we do that with our board meetings. We do board meetings in different parts of the state, with usually one here in Austin, but the other three, the quarterly meetings, someplace else. It gets to be more expensive for our board members who provide their own transportation
Yeah.
and their expenses. But the value in it is it gives us a chance to look at the specific issues in different parts of the state. What it means to be homeless in Amarillo is very different than what it means to be homeless in the valley, in South Texas. And so when we go into a location, we're able to really listen to what the needs are of the community and look at the specific issues.
I see. So you talk to folks there and
Right.
let your board members get a feel of it as well.
So, and then we do our conference on the same kind of schedule. Every other year it's away from Austin. We were in El Paso 3 years ago, and last year we were in San Antonio. And then the other years we're in Austin, and that's very intentional because it's part of our sort of trying to educate people about issues of homelessness right before the legislative year begins,
Including some of the legislators.
including some of the legislators.
People from representatives or senators show up for that?
We very intentionally structure it that way. This year, one of the things that we're doing that is a little different than we've done before is we've asked all the local coalitions, all the different parts of the state in particular, where groups of service providers gather, to really look at the needs of their community and look at what kinds of things could be affected by changes either in legislation or in funding streams through state agencies. And to feed that data to us so that we can put it in some kind of comprehensive form which we can provide to legislative people as we go into the legislative year. And that's going to be an important part of our conference.
1999 is the legislative year.
Right, and you have to get ready long before that starts. So
Right.
98's the year to prepare.
Do you have any idea of what you'd like to have happen as far as the legislative response to homelessness in Texas by the turn of the century and the millennium? I mean, you've got about a year and a half before we're into that. And that's, do you have a vision? Do you have a dream?
Well, I think what we're doing, I think that that's exactly what we're looking for. Is we're looking for what are the common threads across Texas? What are the needs in this state? What are some of the doable things? I mean, we do not live in a time where great masses of money are going to be designated towards anything. I mean, this is kind of a time when, unfortunately, a lot of funds are cut.
Right.
So we're looking particularly for ways that things can be streamlined and made more efficient so that better services can be provided, perhaps even for, with greater efficiency than we've known in the past. And so we're looking for ways that we can really kind of affect
Make
that,
the money
make
go
that
further.
happen, make it all go
Less
further.
duplication, more coordination.
More
which is-
coordination, less
Yeah,
duplication,
right.
more concerted effort to really provide services that are needed.
Probably more incentive on the part of the service agencies to enter into a cooperative mode because they can tell that the money is not as plentiful as it may have once been. And
Exactly.
So they need to make
Exactly.
it
They have to really work at what they
maximize
want.
its effect. Well, we're going to have to minimize our conversation at this point because we are within a few seconds of taking a break. But I would like to say before we do that I want our viewers to anticipate what's going to come in the second half. I want to ask you how you got into this. I want to ask you how the Texas Homeless Network got started in the first place. I want to ask you all these questions I haven't had a chance to ask you in the first half. So stay tuned, folks, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Austin Faith Dialogue, where today our topic is the Texas Homeless Network. It's an agency here in the capital city that coordinates the efforts of a number of agencies around the Lone Star State, particularly those that are helping within the faith community I think this will be of interest to you as we return again to visiting with our guest, Kathy Reed, the Executive Director of Texas Homeless Network. Kathy, at the end of the first half, I just was priming the pump here to say, first, let's talk about how the Homeless Network got started, this Texas.
Well, as I understand, it started because service providers across the state realized that it would be beneficial for them to work together, to coordinate what they do, to talk about what are ideas that work, share resources.
When did it start?
Back before 1989.
Okay.
You know, so it's been around for a while. It was a very informal steering committee for years. Started off with a conference, got incorporated and did all the sort of legal steps that they needed to do to become a real nonprofit organization, and started to receive some state funds because there was a need for a nonprofit agency to really work at helping the efficiency of local service providers.
I mean, the state wouldn't and couldn't do that.
Right. We do some things that the state can't do.
Like what? What can't
Well,
they do?
Well, one good example is that, for example, if a state agency issues a report on homelessness, they're not allowed to mail it to legislative people. They can mail a notice to legislative people that such a report is available.
Oh, really?
But they can't send them an actual report.
Huh. Wow.
But materials that we produce that are educational materials on homelessness, we can feel free to send to legislative people. That would be a little tiny example. And the thing is that there needs to be somebody who really gets information out about funding sources and things that are happening around the state that people need to know about. So like in our newsletter, we try to profile a different program each time we have a newsletter, look at new ideas that people have, look at possible funding sources, keep people notified of some of the state possibilities that there are for funding, some of the big state grants, some of the federal grants that become available.
Right. Hey, now, it's interesting. You got the Texas Mental Health and Retardation, and you got the Texas Housing and Community
Affairs, yeah.
Affairs. Why those agencies funding you?
Well, actually, to be fair, I should say that there are more agencies that participate in what we do. John Sharp's office, the comptroller, prints our newsletter. There's an organization, a state agency organization called the Texas Interagency Council on Homelessness. And it is a council that meets 4 times a year with representatives from all of the different state agencies which would somehow interact in homelessness.
Okay, all right.
And that's kind of really our parent group. I mean, that's the original group that gathered and said, we have a need to have a nonprofit. There's certain things we can't do. There's certain activities that we need to kind of spin off to somebody else.
I see.
And that body is the original body that started funding Texas Homeless Network. Out of that body, our funds primarily come from MHMR and from TDHCA.
But you're the nonprofit counterpart
But
to
we're
this
to the state agency.
state agency.
Right.
Okay. Interesting connection that way. And then to look at it from the connections that you have with the faith-based folks. Who's on your board from?
Well, our board's made up of 21 people who represent the entire state. There are basically 11 regions. We use the Texas Department of Housing and Community Affairs regions, and we make sure that we have one person from each of those regions on our board. So we've got somebody from the Amarillo area and El Paso and the Valley and Midland and
All
just
those
across
board
the
members,
state.
do you have any that are working in congregational related
We
shelters?
have a board member who's in Port Arthur at the Port Arthur Rescue Mission. It happens quite frequently that we have people that come from faith-based. Mike Doyle up in Tarrant County comes from Cornerstone Assistance. We work quite often with faith-based organizations. So on our board we have represented all kinds of people who work for public housing authorities. We have people who work for faith-based organizations, people who do shelters. Salvation Army.
Yeah. You know, one of the things, every once in a while you smile when you talk about this. Which
I
is
love it.
an
I just love
indication
doing
that
what
you-
I'm doing.
You do kind of like it, huh?
I really like it. I really like doing what I do. I mean, it feels really good to be working with an organization that I think really makes a difference. It's hard sometimes when we get the phone calls from a person who is literally homeless in Austin and is just searching desperately for
Right.
a place to stay that night or needs to know where services are, and maybe they are having trouble locating the kinds of services they need. And I'm glad to assist with that. I feel bad that I have to give them another phone number.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to just be.
But
know,
you can
say-
be of some help that way.
But we can help that way. But it's a good feeling, though, too, to be working with the Texas Homeless Network, to feel like you're affecting how homeless services are provided in making it more efficient and more effective across the state. There's a great opportunity for really educating people, making them aware of stuff, and helping them do their jobs better.
You came on, well, you said this organization started in '89. When did you come on board?
I just started 2 years ago.
And how did you happen to
So-
come to do it?
I was looking for a job. Isn't that kind of how we all start off?
Okay.
I was looking for some kind of administrative position, and my other job is that
Okay.
I'm pastor of the Austin Mennonite Church, and that's a less than full-time job, and I've been there for 8 years,
Okay.
and so I was kind of looking for something that would kind of complement what I was already doing in my other job, and at that time in particular, and still now, Austin Mennonite Church was involved with Foundation for the Homeless, which is one of the faith-based organizations here in Austin. And I had worked with their board and done a lot of volunteer work through that agency. And so, through the work that I did with Foundation for the Homeless, that's how I came to find out about the Texas Homeless Network and wound up working for them.
Okay. The Mennonite Church, as a faith tradition, has it had a particular interest or concern about homeless issues?
Well, service is a big part of what we do. Serving your fellow human beings is a big emphasis in Mennonite churches. So most places where you have Mennonite churches, they're doing some kind of outreach, and quite often it is to homeless people, to whoever is needy in the community, and so quite often it is homeless people.
I see. Well, I think that the fact that you also are a clergy person, you've got credentials in that way, so when you're around the state visiting with agencies that are faith-based, you can talk that language as well.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I do bring to the job is that I'm very comfortable working in the faith community, and I feel really positive about helping that. You know, one of the things that I've found about faith-based communities is that we have good hearts, and we want to do good services, but we're not always as organized as we could be.
Right.
And so one of the things I love about working with the Texas Homeless Network is it's sometimes a way for me to help resource agencies so that they can be more efficient and do what they do better. And for sometimes a church that's struggling with some kind of outreach ministry and doesn't quite know how to organize it or doesn't
Yeah.
know how to really make it effective, sometimes we've got some resources where we can really help them organize better.
So that in addition to having good intentions and a good heart, you've got some savvy to go along with that. Well, now, what about, before the show you were also telling me about something that agencies that have got nothing but shoes, left-footed
Well, I
shoes.
think I was telling you about collaboration. You asked me what collaboration was.
What?
And collaboration is a big thing we work on. I mean, we see
What does that have to
ourselves.
do with left-footed shoes?
Well, I'll get to that.
Oh, okay.
The left-footed, right-footed shoes. One of the things we do with the Texas Homeless Network is we're, in essence, a statewide collaboration. And it's a coalition
Okay.
of service providers from across the state. We work on that level. And then in local communities, one of our focuses is to really go to assist local communities in forming coalitions. Here in Austin, we have the Austin Area Homeless Coalition. And to have people get out of their competitive modes.
Yeah.
A lot of the funding historically was competitive. So that if your agency got money, that meant my agency didn't get money. So
Right.
we can't share information because we might somehow be going in different, we might not be able to get
Okay.
the funds we need.
All right.
So one of the things we really work on is I sort of describe as bringing people to the table, where you can look at the needs of the community. And the story I think I told you is that I heard about a skit where they said that, on one side of town they were passing out right-footed shoes, and on the other side of town left-footed shoes, and collaboration would be if they could get together and pass out pairs. And that's kind of what we see ourselves trying to do, is to bring together agencies so they can really look at what are the needs of the community. And maybe you provide shelter and we do food, so can we work together so that we can
I
really
see.
get food and
Okay.
shelter?
All right, yeah. And so that not everybody's doing food, left-footed in that sense, that
Right,
you
right.
vary your
Right.
services. There's a big controversial issue in Austin right now about where to place homeless shelter or to expand that, and the conflict between the downtown homeless services and the adjacent commercial areas. Have you been able to make any input in regard to that issue?
Well, that's a good example of a local issue that we come across in Austin and we deal with in other parts of the state, and that is, trying to
Not in
figure
my
out what.
backyard sort of thing.
Yeah, and trying to figure out how to be the most effective. I mean, where is the best location? And it probably varies in communities.
Okay. But in Austin,
In
what's the
Austin-
answer in Austin?
In Austin, the mayor's initiative, I think, is a very wise proposal, because you already have services clustered together with Caritas and the Salvation Army particularly, and Foundation for the Homeless is quite close to that. You already have a cluster of agencies that are within a particular region. And it makes sense, because if you spread things out, you're going to have to provide a lot of transportation. And so there's a lot of wisdom, I think, to the mayor's plan here in Austin and his initiative to really bring about the services he's proposing.
The service possibility like they have in Orlando with a significant sized campus or shelter, that I guess that's more or less not on the drawing board at this point.
Well, I think that would be more difficult in Austin. I think that this plan is probably more realistic. And as I understand it, there are some downtown businesses who aren't really happy with the plan, but there are many that really do support having more services provided. But for one thing, it's no good for anybody to have somebody sleeping, on your front porch.
Right.
And if services can be provided in an effective way so that people aren't perhaps as needy, so that they don't sort of impose themselves on businesses,
Yeah.
it's better for the
Yeah.
whole community.
Yeah.
It's better for the whole community.
Okay. I think too that we've got the kind of a track history here in Austin that is hopeful in regard to.
This is a very caring community.
Yeah.
A very caring community, and we have wonderful faith-based organizations and churches that really want to make sure that the people of Austin have their needs met, and that includes the homeless people of our community. When they've done studies about homeless people in Austin, they're not people who have just moved to town because we've got great weather and beautiful scenery. There are people in our community who have found themselves in this difficult situation of being homeless.
In our closing minute here, something just came to mind. Isn't it on the Statue of Liberty that says, "Give me your homeless, poor"?
Huddled masses,
Or
yearning
huddled
to be
masses?
free.
That something about our national commitment is involved in this, and in the Bible and Isaiah about that this is the fast, is to extend the mercy to the homeless.
Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to end on a note that anchored this in faith as well as in our
Absolutely.
democratic commitment. And I want to thank you, Kathy Reed.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job, and keep doing it.
I love it.
Good. You folks keep watching us on Austin Faith Dialogue. We'll be back next Sunday as usual at this time, and peace be with you.